Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. All right, everybody, I'm back. Gonna be back. So tell you what, it's Friday evening. I got to be quick here. I'm actually going to the Dodgers-Giants game tonight. So first Major League Baseball game I've been to in a minute. But it's funny, right? Thursday, Aaron Torres pod, we talked about a lot of things, but one of them was Elmir Zvacic, the 7-foot center from Bosnia who committed to Arkansas. We talked about him. I'm not going to reset it here, but the big conversation was, is Arkansas done? Is their roster complete? I put out a tweet at the time after Zvacic committed. We talked about it on the show, and I said, I think this is the final piece of the Arkansas Razorbacks roster. Well, I had both fans and media members tell me, Torres, you may want to keep that little eye out because there could be more good news coming. Well, tell you what, was in the car about 15 minutes ago when the news comes across my feed that, how about this? 2025 4-star Paulo Semedo, he's originally from Angola, played high school ball here last year. How about this? The kids on Instagram, they call him African Wemby. I'm not making this up. African Wemby, Paulo Semedo, originally from Angola, played in Florida. Well, just moments ago, he committed to the Arkansas Razorbacks, baby. And with that, you already know, I just got one question for you. Can anything stop the Big Pig invasion? We had the Bosnian Big Pig invasion just the other day. Now the Angolan Big Pig invasion is coming to Fayetteville. Let's talk about Paulo Semedo, because I'll tell you this. Listen, we said it with Elmir. We're not going to try to overhype. We're not going to say this is the biggest commitment in the history of the program. But at the same time, it goes back to what I continue to say. In this new era with 15 scholarships, it's about roster building. It's about allocation. It's about finding the right pieces in the right spots. And I love this roster that John Calipari has put together with, as I said, Paulo Semedo, the most recent commitment just moments ago. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into this. Couple things. First of all, just, one thing about me, you can like me, you can hate me. I'm never wrong. I'm never afraid to acknowledge when I just got to take an L. And I got to take an L on this one because I remember when Carter Knox ended up announcing he was coming back to play college basketball this year. I said, I kind of felt like the roster maybe was set. I said, you got 10 guys that you can go to war with. Obviously, the 4 returnees, DJ Wagner, Billy Richmond, Carter Knox, and Trevin Brazil. You had, of course, on top of it, the 2 transfers, Malik Ewan and Nick Pringle. You had, after that, the 4 guys that are freshman-ish, right? So Malik Thomas, Darius Acuff, Isaiah Sealy, and Kareem Rattal. So we're talking about right now, that's 10 players that you could go to war with. Now, it felt like maybe you add another big body. You don't want to come up short, especially late in the season. Injuries happen. We saw what happened last year. So they add Zvacic. But I'll tell you this. I actually, in some ways, like the addition more of Paulo Semedo. Now, listen, again, we talked about Zvacic yesterday. I think it's just so important. Listen, when I said good things about him, you already know what happened. A certain fan base where John Calipari used to coach, oh, Torres, you're totally gassing this guy up. No, I'm not. Because at the end of the day, Elmir Zvacic, and it's the same with Paulo Semedo, it's not their job to come in and be the star for this team, to be the best player. But can they play a very limited role? Can they develop? And most importantly, 2 things. Can they provide depth in case of injury? And can they be great practice players? I absolutely believe they can. And so I love both commitments, but let's get further into Paulo Semedo, okay? So basically, listen, by now you've all watched the highlights. Like I said, top 50 player, class of 2025, so he will be enrolling this coming year. 7'1", can handle the ball. And I'll say this, we've all seen, the 7-foot kid that maybe doesn't really have the coordination and he's kind of more of a defense, energy, whatever. This kid feels like he can handle a little bit. He can shoot a little bit. He can do a little bit of everything, okay? You know what he actually reminds me of in a lot of ways? You know the player he reminds me of? He actually reminds me of Trevin Brazil, currently at Arkansas. Trevin Brazil's like 6'10", 6'11", but he's coordinated. He runs the floor. He rebounds the crap out of the ball. He blocks shots. He's great at the rim. He's added weight in his now 3 years at Arkansas going into year 4. And that's kind of who I think Paulo Semedo is going to be, if he trusts the process and stays in the program. Again, we're not saying that he is going to be the best player on this team. And if he doesn't average 20, he's going to average 20 and he's going to be SEC Player of the Year. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, can he come in? Can he develop? Because if he continues to develop, if he's on the trajectory, I could see him being a very important piece this year and then potentially taking over for Trevin Brazil next year. Because remember, the whole front court is basically graduating after this year. Nick Pringle, Malik Ewan, and Trevin Brazil, I believe, and if I'm wrong, Arkansas fans correct me, are all out of eligibility after this season. I think beyond that, though, so there's two things that I think that Paulo Semedo and also, and we talked about this with Elmir Zvacic yesterday, is that I think there are two things they can provide. One is obviously depth in case of injury, okay? And we saw it, unfortunately, there was no better example of why you need just a couple extra bodies than the Arkansas Razorbacks last year. Listen to it, I didn't hate the idea of really putting all your eggs with 9 players at this time last year with Arkansas. So they went with the 9 players that they had: Big Z, Jonas Adu, Trevin Brazil, Adu Thero, who else? DJ Wagner, Billy Ray. You know who the players were, but they had 9. But you also see the high risk, high reward that comes with that. When it all clicks, you got 9 great players and everybody knows their role. But when an injury happened, when a twisted ankle happened, when Big Z hurts his thumb in the SEC tournament, all of a sudden you just put yourself at risk of so much, where SEC tournament, NCAA tournament, you're just rotating bodies to try to keep everybody out of foul trouble. And so I believe that both Zvacic, but also Paulo Semedo can provide the two things that I think are really important in their role. One, it is a body to have in case of injury. And listen, nobody roots for injury. Nobody wants injury. But the counter to that is injury does happen. You go back to Arkansas last year. Jonas Adu was out to start the year. Big Z had Trevin Brazil got hurt early in the season. What was it? An ankle? It was something. It was this. It was that. But both those guys are out. Big Z's having to play all kinds of crazy minutes. Then later in the year, Boogie Flan gets hurt. You're down a guard. Then Adu Thero gets hurt. You're down a wingish big guy. Then, oh, by the way, as I mentioned, Jonas Adu's healthy, but Big Z hurts his thumb, and you're just trying to survive in the NCAA tournament. You're playing guys that you never thought you'd have to, certainly in the roles that you thought you had to play in. So one, a Paulo Semedo, a Elmir Zvacic, guys like that, and Isaiah Celia, Kareem Ratali, those are the guys that you don't want to have to play 30 minutes, but you might have to play them 18 here, 12 there, 0 there sometimes. So that's important. To me, beyond that, here's the other thing. What I think is also important is competitive depth for practice. Okay, Cal talked about this during the season. He talked about, man, we can't even run a full 5-on-5. Well, guess what? That excuse is, I'm not saying it's an excuse, but that conversation is kind of out of the window now. And I'll say this, I think that kind of depth is important. I'll say this, I think it's actually been very interesting watching all of these programs, knowing with the House settlement that they'll get 15 scholarships and how they've used them. A lot of programs have really used those scholarship 12, 13, 14, maybe 15 to really just add back end to bench guys, either developmental freshmen, redshirt freshmen, younger guys. By the way, there's a chance Paulo Semedo even redshirts. I know that Cal has talked about bringing in a guy to redshirt. But at the same time, it's been interesting to see all these programs use those late scholarships to go with guys that might redshirt, freshmen that might not play, or the opposite. A veteran dude that's just going to be happy to be along for the ride. My UConn Huskies, they added 2 mid-major transfers very late in the spring. They got all their key guys back. This guy's coming back. That guy's coming back. They added a transfer from IU Indy. They added a transfer from Lemoyne to basically say, hey, come here. You're going to have a chance to compete for everything. But what we really need you for is practice, competitive depth. You may get a shot here or there, but we need you to come here, put on the uniform, represent it well, and compete like hell in practice. And if you're good enough, you'll play. By the way, Kentucky, because of course Kentucky fans had a lot to say when I said nice things about Elmir Zvacic, but I said the same thing when they added Reed Potter a few weeks ago, when they added Braden Hawthorne a few weeks ago. Those are great dudes if you're not counting on them for 31 minutes a night. And so it's the same with Paulo Semedo. It's the same with Elmir Zvacic. I think they can be great practice players, tough as hell, get Malik Ewan ready for games, get Trevin Brazil ready for games, get whoever, Nick Pringle ready for games, whatever. You hope you don't have to play them. Again, you may even redshirt one of them, but they're great players to have in the program, and they're great pieces, and they certainly got high upside because, again, I'd be lying if I said I was familiar with African Wemby, Paulo Semedo, or at least with that nickname. I had obviously heard the name, but wasn't necessarily familiar with the nickname of African Wemby. But it shows you what kind of upside he has. And no, I don't expect him to be a Wembanyama, but it is an interesting piece of news. So Arkansas gets another guy. They add a piece. Tell you what, man, this Big Pig invasion is coming. Get your t-shirt, AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. By the way, we will be back Sunday night. We got a very interesting interview. Appreciate your support. Make sure to subscribe. Torres on the Hogs for all your late-breaking Arkansas news.